Imagine surviving a brutal medieval battle, only to discover that your fate afterward might be even more terrifying. Because for many prisoners, the real nightmare didn't begin on the battlefield. It began after it. Chapter 1. The moment the battle ends. Chaos, captivity, and first decisions. When a medieval battle ended, it didn't end the way we imagine. No trumpet, no clear high signal, no heroic music. It ended in confusion, in dust, in screams fading into groans. The field transformed from a place of fury to a place of fear. And for the men who survived, especially the ones who lost, the final swing of the sword was only the beginning of their nightmare. The moment an army began to collapse, panic spread like wildfire. Soldiers who just minutes earlier fought with courage suddenly dropped shields and ran. Many were cut down while fleeing, some tripped over corpses, others simply surrendered by throwing themselves to the ground, begging for mercy. But mercy was never guaranteed. Victors had to make decisions quickly, who to keep, who to kill, and who to ignore. And these decisions weren't made out of compassion. They were made out of necessity, strategy, and sometimes revenge. Picture the scene. A wounded knight, exhausted and bleeding, stumbles into the hands of enemy soldiers. They instantly recognize him by his expensive armor. That alone could save his life. A nobleman was worth gold, literally. Capturing one meant ransom money, influence, favors, or prestige. His captors would shove him aside carefully, tying his hands, but making sure he didn't die. A dead noble was wasted profit, a single sword thrust, a quick axe strike. Sometimes even an order shouted from a commander, "No prisoners!" For low-value enemies, taking captives slowed down armies and consumed resources. So they were simply eliminated, but not always. Sometimes common soldiers were spared for labor. Armies needed men to carry loot, dig graves, move siege equipment, or serve as servants. In the first chaotic hour after a battle, these captured commoners were rounded up, tied together with rope or chains, and forced to march. And their treatment depended entirely on the temperament of the soldiers around them. Imagine being dragged through a field littered with bodies, friends, enemies, horses, while captors argue about your fate. Kill him now. No, we might need him. He's too weak, leave him. Take him, the commander wants numbers. And then there were battles where taking prisoners was nearly a sport. A soldier who captured a valuable noble could change his entire life. Sometimes, chaos erupted as multiple captors fought over the same prisoner, each claiming rights to the ransom. Fistfights, shouting, even deadly arguments over a living human price. For the prisoner, the immediate aftermath of battle was a nightmare maze. Stay alive. Stay quiet. Don't provoke anyone. Don't fall. Don't bleed out. Some pretended to be dead until nightfall. Some crawled away into forests. Some were caught and beaten for trying, and some managed a miraculous escape, slipping through the confusion and running until their legs gave out. Chapter 2 reveals the brutal ritual every captured prisoner faced, and the journey that broke even the strongest men. Chapter 2. Bound, beaten, and paraded, the captured warrior's first hours. If the chaos of the battlefield was terrifying, the first hours after capture were far worse, because now the prisoner wasn't just fighting for survival, he was completely powerless. No weapon, no armor, no control. His fate lay entirely in the hands of men who, moments earlier, had tried to kill him. The first thing most prisoners felt was hands gripping them, shoving them to the ground. Captors worked quickly to ensure a prisoner couldn't escape or fight back. Leather cords, rough ropes, even strips torn from clothing were used to bind hands behind backs or tie wrists to necks. The tighter the rope, the safer the captor felt. Many prisoners lost circulation within minutes, hands swelling, fingers going numb. Then came the stripping. Armor, especially good armor, was worth a fortune. It was often the first thing removed. Picture soldiers pulling at buckles and straps with impatient hands. The prisoner is shoved, rolled, kicked, even stabbed lightly to hurry him up. If the armor was dented or blood-soaked, they tore it off with even less care. Common soldiers were stripped the most brutally. Their boots, belts, knives, even shirts were ripped away, turning them into half-naked trophies. Once bound and stripped, prisoners faced the mocking parade. Victorious soldiers loved displaying their captives. They marched them through the battlefield or toward the camp, shouting insults, laughing, waving stolen weapons in the prisoners' faces. The captured men walked with heads bowed, not because they wanted to, but because looking up could earn a blow to the face. Imagine walking between two lines of enemy soldiers, each one eager to leave a mark. A kick to the ribs, a slap across the face, a shove that sends you into the mud, a rock thrown just for fun. This wasn't discipline or strategy, this was raw, human cruelty. Prisoners who stumbled or fell were beaten until they stood again. If they fainted from pain or blood loss, some captors doused them with water, others simply dragged them like dead weight. And then came the interrogations, not polite questioning, not negotiations. Interrogations meant pain. A commander wanted information. Where is the enemy camp? Nobles were questioned more diplomatically, but the pressure was the same. The threat of losing a hand, an ear, or an eye made most of them talk. At this stage, refusing could mean execution. Cooperation meant a chance, however small, of survival. After interrogations came the march. This was the true test of endurance. Bound prisoners were forced to walk miles, often barefoot, over jagged rocks, frozen mud, or burning summer dust. Their captors rode horseback, which meant the prisoners had to move quickly or be whipped from behind. Each man connected by a rope around the neck. If the front stumbled, the back choked. If the back slowed, the front was yanked. Off balance. The entire line had to march in unison or suffer together, and all the while the uncertainty gnawed at them. Would they be ransomed? Sold as slaves? Tortured? Executed at sunset? No one knew. In Chapter 3, we uncover those three fates: ransom, slavery, or death, and how a single detail could decide everything.
Chapter 3: Ransom, Slavery, or Death. The three fates. No one escaped when the prisoners finally reached the enemy camp. The chaotic fear of the battlefield shifted into something colder: calculation. Every captured man, from wounded knight to terrified peasant, was now an asset to be evaluated. Lives were weighed like merchandise. A prisoner's fate depended not on his bravery or skill, but on three things: status, usefulness, and political value. And from these factors emerged the three paths every medieval prisoner faced: ransom, slavery, or death. 1. The golden fate. Ransom: if you had a name, you had a price for nobles, knights, wealthy merchants, and officers. Being captured was almost a business arrangement. Medieval warfare had an unwritten rule: if you caught a noble, you didn't kill him, you sold him back. Imagine a knight sitting in a tent, hands tied but treated with politeness. Bread, water, maybe even wine. Why? Because he was money! Real money! A single knight could be worth years of wages. A wealthy lord could be worth the equivalent of a modern luxury home. Kings. They were worth fortunes that crippled kingdoms. The captor would examine the prisoner as if appraising jewelry is his armor high quality. Does he wear noble rings or emblems? Are his clothes fine under the armor? Does he speak with the accent of wealth? Do others refer to him as Sir, Lord, or my lord? The more prestigious the prisoner, the better the treatment. A noble could expect cleaner food, a tent, or shelter guards who avoided harming him, sometimes even small comforts like a blanket or cushion, but this wasn't mercy. This was investment. Letters were sent demanding ransom, payments negotiated, terms debated. Some nobles even sat at the negotiation table to advise on their own price after all. Their comfort depended on how quickly the money arrived, but ransom came with humiliation. The nobleman had to admit defeat. His family had to scramble to raise the money, sometimes selling land or begging allies. And when he finally returned home, he returned with shaman debt. Still, of all the fates a prisoner could face, ransom was the dream, because the others were far darker. 2. The harsh middle fate. Slavery and forced labor. If a man wasn't worth rent, captors found another use for him. Work. Common foot soldiers, peasants, camp followers, and young men strong enough to labor were chained and sorted like livestock. They were assigned tasks, digging latrines, carrying supplies, repairing roads, building siege engines, working in mines, rowing ships, cleaning camps, tending to horses, and this wasn't temporary. Some prisoners served for months, some for years, and some for the rest of their lives. Imagine a once proud young warrior spending the next decade hauling stones for the people who conquered him, or a farmer forced to serve as a kitchen slave, stirring pots beside men who once tried to kill him. Treatment varied wildly. Some masters provided food and shelter bare minimum, but survivable. Others were cruel, beating laborers for moving too slowly or giving them impossible tasks. A single mistake could mean a lash, a broken rib, or execution. Slaves who tried to escape were branded, mutilated, or killed as an example to others. And the saddest part, many never saw home again. Not because they died, but because after years of forced labor, there was no home left to return to. 3. The darkest fate. Execution and mutilation. The third fate was the most brutal and the most unpredictable. Captors killed prisoners when there were too many to guard, but what about those who survived long-term imprisonment? What was daily life truly like inside medieval prison camps? Chapter 4 reveals the disease, brutality, starvation, and psychological torment that shaped the prisoners' darkest days.
Chapter 6: The Myth, the Reality, and the Legacy of a Viking Funeral. For more than 1,000 years, the idea of a Viking funeral has lived a double life. On one side, there's the mythan unforgettable scene of a blazing longship slipping away beneath a burning sky. On the other, there's the messy, complicated historical reality. But between these two extremes is something far more interesting. Why this ritual mattered, why it survived in our imagination, and why it still fascinates millions today. To understand the legacy of the Viking funeral, you have to understand the Vikings themselves. One spectacular funeral might be retold for centuries, carried from one firelit hall to another until it grew into a cultural icon. But what about the average Viking? Their funerals, though simpler, still carried their own powerful symbolism. A thrall sacrificed, food placed carefully for the journey ahead, tools, weapons, and belongings arranged around the body like quiet companions. Everything chosen with intention. A careless burial could offend the gods. A proper one could secure blessings, safety, and good fortune. The community's survival depended on doing it right. And that's why grave goods mattered so much. It wasn't about wealth, it was about readiness. A declaration that said, "Here lies someone whose memory matters." The legacy of Viking funerals lives on today in ways we rarely notice. In the sagas that inspired centuries of literature, in the archaeology that continues to reveal new secrets, in modern films and games that echo ancient traditions, and even in how we talk about sending someone off or giving a hero's farewell. But the real legacy is something quieter, and that is why their funerals, real or mythologized, still burn so brightly in our imagination. They remind us that even in death, a person's story can rise like smoke into the endless sky.